June 6, 1944, 06 to 30 hours, Omaha Beach, Normandy, the most heavily defended stretch of sand in human history. German machine guns positioned in concrete bunkers. Artillery zeroed in on every meter of shoreline. Fields of fire so perfectly calculated that the Germans called it a killing box. In the first 30 minutes of the D-Day invasion, over 2,000 American soldiers would die on this beach alone. Bodies floating in the surf, blood mixing with salt water, young men crying for their mothers as bullets tore through flesh. It was by every military measure a complete catastrophe. And somewhere in that chaos, wading through chest-deep water, with 70 pounds of equipment dragging him toward the bottom, was a 34-year-old sergeant that the United States Army had deemed too fat for combat. His name was John Robert Slaughter. He weighed 230 pounds on a 5.9 frame. Military regulations said he should weigh no more than 175 pounds. Officers had recommended he be reassigned to supply duties. His fellow soldiers called him Tubby and Fatty. His battalion commander had personally signed paperwork stating that Sergeant Slaughter was unfit for frontline combat due to excessive weight. But in the next 18 hours, this overweight farm boy from Virginia would kill 76 German soldiers. More confirmed kills than any other American achieved on D-Day. More than entire platoons managed collectively. And he would do it while carrying extra ammunition and grenades that lighter soldiers couldn't handle. To understand what happened on that beach, you need to understand what the Allied forces were facing in the summer of 1944. The German Atlantic Wall stretched from Norway to Spain. Thousands of miles of fortifications, bunkers, obstacles, and defensive positions built over 4 years of occupation. Hitler had poured concrete and steel into this barrier, knowing that eventually the Allies would attempt an invasion of Europe, and he was determined to throw them back into the sea. The intelligence failure at Omaha Beach was catastrophic. American planners had estimated moderate German resistance in the sector designated Dog Green. They were wrong. The German 352nd Infantry Division, a battle-hardened unit transferred from the Eastern Front, had moved into position just weeks before the invasion. These weren't garrison troops. These were veterans who had fought the Soviets. They knew how to kill. The fortifications at Omaha Beach were designed for maximum carnage. Machine gun nests positioned in overlapping fields of fire. Pre-registered artillery that could drop shells on any point of the beach with deadly accuracy. Obstacles in the water designed to tear open landing craft. Mines buried in the sand. Every advantage belonged to the defenders. American military planners knew the invasion would be costly. They estimated 10,000 casualties on the first day across all beaches. What they didn't anticipate was how concentrated those casualties would be at Omaha. The other beaches, Utah, Juneau, Gold, and Sword, achieved their objectives with relatively moderate losses. Omaha nearly failed completely. In the first hour, almost nothing went according to plan. Naval bombardment that was supposed to destroy German positions had largely missed due to poor visibility. Amphibious tanks that were supposed to provide covering fire sank in rough seas, drowning their crews. Landing craft dropped soldiers too far from shore, forcing them to wade through deep water under murderous fire. The first wave was slaughtered. The second wave piled onto the beach behind them and was slaughtered too. By 0700 hours, American commanders were considering the unthinkable, evacuating Omaha Beach entirely and acknowledging defeat. Men lay dead and dying on the sand, and the survivors couldn't move forward or backward. They could only press themselves against obstacles and pray. But something was about to change, and it would come from the most unlikely soldier on that beach. John Robert Slaughter was born March 15, 1910, in Roanoke, Virginia. He grew up on a family farm where physical labor wasn't optional. From age 10, young John hauled hay bales that weighed as much as he did. He lifted feed sacks, plowed fields behind stubborn mules, repaired fences in summer heat and winter cold. The work was relentless, and it built a body that defied conventional understanding of fitness. By his late teens, Slaughter could lift weights that left thinner men gasping. He could work from dawn to dusk without rest. His endurance came not from running laps on a track, but from years of labor that never ended. When he enlisted in the Virginia National Guard in 1936, medical officers immediately flagged his weight. At 210 pounds for his 5.9 height, he exceeded the maximum by 35 pounds. But the Guard needed men, and Slaughter was obviously healthy despite what the chart said. They let him serve. For 5 years he drilled on weekends and trained during summers. His fitness scores were acceptable. His marksmanship was exceptional. He was promoted to corporal based on pure performance. His service record contained a note that would prove prophetic. Despite being overweight by regulations, performs as a capable soldier. When Pearl Harbor pulled America into the war, Slaughter knew he had to fight. He was 31 years old. He weighed 230 pounds. And the recruiting sergeant took one look at his physical and shook his head. "You're 40 pounds over the weight limit. We can't take you." Slaughter argued. He had National Guard experience. He was strong. He could prove it. The sergeant remained skeptical, but eventually processed his enlistment with a waiver that would haunt Slaughter for the next 2 years. Excessive weight. Recommend assignment to non-combat duties. The mockery began the moment he reported to the 29th Infantry Division. Young soldiers, most of them in their early 20s and weighing 150 to 170 pounds, saw an overweight man in his 30s and assumed he was a liability. They called him Tubby. They called him Fatty. Officers questioned whether he could keep up on forced marches. His company commander suggested supply duties where his weight wouldn't matter. Slaughter understood something that his critics didn't. Combat wasn't about running fast. It was about endurance strength and the will to keep fighting when everything inside you screamed to stop. These qualities he possessed in abundance. But in the military of 1942, there was no test for determination. There was only the height-weight chart, and the chart said John Slaughter was too fat to fight. The idea that weight determined combat effectiveness was so deeply embedded in military thinking that questioning it seemed insane. Regulations existed for reasons. Physical standards ensured soldiers could perform. Overweight men would slow down their units, become casualties quickly, and drag others into danger. This was accepted wisdom. This was doctrine. And John Slaughter was about to prove it completely wrong. During training in England through the winter of 1943 and into 1944, Slaughter's weight became a constant issue. He failed his first physical fitness test. He struggled with obstacle courses designed for lighter men. He finished last in timed runs. Medical officers submitted paperwork recommending his transfer to rear echelon duties. His battalion commander signed it. But Slaughter refused. He'd enlisted to fight, not to push papers. While other soldiers rested, he trained. While they slept, he ran extra miles in the dark. He carried heavier loads than required to prove he could handle combat equipment. He improved his fitness scores gradually, not through weight loss, but through demonstrating that his bulk was muscle, not fat. His qualifying scores with the M1 Garand were expert. His tactical knowledge exceeded many junior officers. His endurance on long marches despite finishing last in sprints was remarkable. The military system couldn't process someone who failed some metrics while excelling at others. Eventually exhausted by his persistence, rather than convinced of his ability, his commanders allowed him to remain with the frontline infantry. He would participate in D-Day. But the skepticism remained. His company commander's final assessment before the invasion stated bluntly, "Sergeant Slaughter is the fattest soldier in the battalion. His effectiveness in combat remains to be determined." They would determine it on June 6, 1944, and the results would shock everyone who had ever called him too fat. The landing craft carrying Slaughter's company approached Omaha Beach through rough seas and German artillery fire. Several craft were hit and sank before reaching the obstacles. Men drowned, dragged down by their equipment before they could even reach the killing zone. Slaughter's craft made it to the beach obstacles. The front ramp dropped. German machine gun fire immediately swept across the opening. The first 3 men out died before their feet touched water. Slaughter watched from his position midway back in the craft. He could see bodies piling up at the ramp. He could hear bullets pinging off the steel hull. Every instinct said to stay in the relative protection of the landing craft. But staying meant dying when German artillery inevitably found them. He jumped off the side into shoulder-deep water. His 70 pounds of equipment, rifle, ammunition, grenades, and supplies pulled him under immediately. Lighter men around him were struggling with the same weight, some of them drowning before reaching the surface. But Slaughter's farm-built strength pushed off the bottom. He surfaced. He waded toward the beach. Bullets struck his pack. One grazed his helmet. Artillery shells exploded in the surf, creating geysers of water and blood. He kept moving. He reached the sand. He crawled behind the first available obstacle. And he assessed the situation with eyes that had seen nothing but chaos and death. Company D had been destroyed. Of 197 men in the first wave, over 100 were already dead or wounded. Survivors were pinned down with no ability to advance or retreat. German fire from elevated positions dominated every inch of the beach. Without someone moving forward to eliminate those positions, everyone would die. Slaughter looked at the nearest German bunker. 200 yards of open beach separated him from it. Every soldier who had tried to cross that ground was dead. The fat sergeant, who everyone said couldn't fight, decided to prove them wrong. He started crawling, using shell craters, obstacles, and slight depressions in the sand. Moving when German attention was elsewhere. Freezing when machine guns swung toward him. The slow advance took 30 minutes to cover those 200 yards. He reached a disabled tank approximately 30 yards from the bunker. From here, he could see the machine gun barrel sweeping back and forth through the firing slit. He prepared a grenade. He calculated the distance. He waited for the gun to point away. Then he threw. The grenade arced through the morning air and landed perfectly inside the bunker's firing slit. The explosion inside the concrete structure was devastating. The machine gun fell silent. Germans inside were dead or wounded. And for the first time that morning, a section of Omaha Beach was free from enfilading fire. Slaughter didn't stop to celebrate. He immediately moved to the next German position. What followed over the next several hours would become one of D-Day's most remarkable individual performances. By noon, the man they called Too Fat had killed 38 confirmed Germans. He'd eliminated 6 machine gun positions. He'd thrown approximately 20 grenades, with 18 hitting their targets. His marksmanship was deadly accurate despite combat conditions. And other soldiers, seeing that movement was possible, began following his example. The beach that had seemed hopeless at 0700 was secured by noon. But this was only the beginning. The afternoon would bring village fighting. The evening would bring German counterattacks. And John Slaughter was far from finished proving everyone wrong. In Part 2, we'll follow Slaughter as he leads the assault on the village of Vierville-sur-Mer, where his kill count will climb toward its final devastating total. We'll see German commanders desperately trying to throw the Americans back into the sea. And we'll witness the moment when the officers who called him too fat finally admitted they had been completely and utterly wrong about what makes a soldier effective. The question is, how many more Germans would die before the day was over, and what would it cost John Slaughter to prove that weight charts measure weight, not courage? 38 Germans. That's how many men John Slaughter had killed by noon on June 6, 1944. The sergeant that the United States Army had deemed too fat for combat had crawled across 200 yards of hell on Omaha Beach. He had thrown a grenade through a bunker slit with perfect accuracy. He had eliminated 6 machine gun positions, while lighter, fitter soldiers remained pinned down in the sand. By noon, the beach was secured. But the invasion was far from over. The Germans had fallen back to secondary positions in the villages and hedgerows of Normandy. They were regrouping. They were preparing counterattacks. And standing between the American forces and complete victory was a small French village called Vieilleville-sur-Mer. Intelligence reported at least 150 German defenders dug into stone buildings and fortified positions. Machine guns covered every approach road. Snipers occupied church towers and upper floors. The village had to be taken to secure the beach exits, but 3 previous assault attempts had been thrown back with heavy casualties. Now the same commanders who had called Slaughter too fat were about to ask him to do the impossible once again. The approach to Vieilleville was a death trap. Open fields stretched for nearly a kilometer between American positions and the village outskirts. German observers could see every movement. Artillery was pre-registered on likely approach routes. Any force attempting a direct assault would be cut to pieces before reaching the first building. Captain Harold Bingham, Slaughter's company commander, gathered the surviving officers and NCOs for a hasty planning session behind a destroyed farmhouse. The situation was grim. Company D had started the day with 197 men. Now they had fewer than 80 still combat effective. Ammunition was running low, medical supplies were almost exhausted, and headquarters was demanding that Vieilleville be taken before nightfall. "We've tried 3 times. Lieutenant Morrison said, spreading a mud-stained map on the ground. "Every approach is covered. They've got machine guns in the church tower, at least 2 more in fortified positions on the southern edge. We lose 20 men every time we try to cross those fields." Captain Bingham nodded grimly. "Regiment wants that village secured by 1800 hours. They're bringing reinforcements and supplies through those roads tonight. If we don't take Vieilleville, the whole beach position is vulnerable to counterattack." Slaughter studied the map. His eyes traced the contour lines, looking for something the others had missed. The direct approaches were suicide. Everyone knew that. But there on the eastern edge of the map was a thin blue line. A sunken road probably used by farmers to move equipment between fields. It ran from American positions to within 500 meters of Vieilleville's eastern edge. And from the direction of German fire during previous assaults, the eastern approach appeared to be their weak point. "That sunken road," Slaughter said, pointing. "Has anyone tried it?" Lieutenant Morrison shook his head. "Too narrow. We'd have to move single file. If they spot us, we'd be trapped with no cover." "But if they don't spot us," Slaughter replied, "we come up on their flank. They're expecting attacks from the beach side, not from the east." Captain Bingham looked at the overweight sergeant with new eyes. This was the man who had crawled across Omaha Beach when everyone else was paralyzed. The man who had killed 38 Germans in 6 hours. The man whose weight had been cited as a disqualifying liability just months ago. "You're volunteering to lead this?" Bingham asked. Slaughter nodded. "Give me 12 men. We go through the sunken road, hit them from the east while you demonstrate from the south. They'll be looking the wrong way when we attack." It was a desperate plan. If the Germans discovered the flanking force, Slaughter and his men would be annihilated in the confined space of the sunken road. There would be no retreat, no cover, no survival. But it was also the only plan that might work. Slaughter handpicked his squad. He chose men he had fought alongside on the beach. Men who had seen him eliminate German positions while others cowered. Men who trusted him despite his weight, or perhaps because they had seen that weight meant nothing when bullets were flying. Private First Class Thomas Wheeler, a 22-year-old from Ohio who had watched Slaughter destroy 3 bunkers. Corporal James Martinez, who had followed Slaughter up the bluffs when his own squad leader was killed. Private Robert Kowalski, a Polish immigrant who spoke German and might be useful for interrogating prisoners. 9 others, all volunteers, all willing to follow the fat sergeant into the unknown. They loaded extra ammunition. Slaughter carried 8 grenades instead of the standard 4 plus additional rifle magazines. His pack weighed over 80 pounds. Other soldiers struggled with 60. But Slaughter's farm-built strength made the extra weight manageable. At 1330 hours, the squad moved out. The sunken road was exactly as Slaughter had hoped. Steep earthen banks nearly 6 feet high on both sides provided complete concealment from German observation. The squad moved in single file, weapons ready, advancing slowly to minimize noise. 500 meters of blind movement, unable to see threats until they were directly upon them. Every man knew that a single German patrol could turn the road into a killing ground. They moved for nearly 40 minutes. The sounds of distant gunfire echoed across the Norman countryside. Captain Bingham's demonstration attack was beginning, drawing German attention toward the southern approaches. Slaughter could hear machine gun fire increasing in intensity. The Germans were focused exactly where they needed them to be focused. At approximately 1350 hours, the squad reached the end of the sunken road. They emerged into a small orchard on Vierville's eastern edge. German positions were visible 200 meters ahead. Stone buildings sandbagged windows, the distinctive outline of a machine gun barrel protruding from a fortified barn, and not a single German was looking in their direction. Slaughter divided his squad into 3 fire teams. 4 men would assault the first building, a stone cottage with Germans visible through windows. 4 more would hit the fortified barn immediately after. The final 4, including Slaughter, would provide covering fire and exploit any breakthrough. "On my signal," Slaughter whispered. "Grenades first, then immediate entry. Don't give them time to react." He raised his hand, held it for 3 seconds, then dropped it sharply. The first grenade flew through the cottage window at exactly 1400 hours. The explosion shattered glass and stone. German screams followed immediately. Wheeler's fire team rushed the door, weapons blazing. 3 Germans inside died before they could raise their rifles. The second grenade hit the fortified barn's ventilation hole. Slaughter had spotted it during his observation, a gap in the roof just large enough for a well-thrown explosive. The detonation inside was devastating. Sandbags meant to protect the defenders channeled the blast inward. 4 Germans died instantly. Survivors stumbled out the door into Martinez's waiting rifle fire. Within 60 seconds, 2 German positions were eliminated. 8 enemy soldiers were dead, and Slaughter's squad had suffered 0 casualties. But the element of surprise was gone now. German defenders throughout Vierville realized they were being attacked from an unexpected direction. Officers shouted orders. Soldiers repositioned. Machine guns swung toward the eastern edge where Americans were suddenly appearing. Slaughter didn't give them time to reorganize. "Keep moving," he shouted. "Building to building. Don't let them set up." The next 2 hours were a masterclass in urban combat. Slaughter's squad fought through 5 buildings each assault, following the same brutal pattern. Grenades to stun defenders. Immediate entry, while Germans were disoriented. Close quarters shooting. Rapid movement to the next position. Slaughter personally cleared the 3rd building, a 2-story stone structure, where 6 Germans had established a strongpoint. He threw 2 grenades through ground floor windows, then climbed to the roof using exterior stonework, while his men assaulted the front door. When Germans tried to escape up the stairs, Slaughter dropped through a roof hatch behind them. 3 Germans died in the hallway, shot from a direction they never expected. The 4th building was harder, a fortified wine cellar with only 1 entrance defended by Germans who knew they were trapped. Slaughter's men couldn't get grenades inside. Direct assault would mean casualties. Instead, Slaughter found a ventilation shaft behind the building. He poured a can of fuel oil down the shaft, followed by a lit match. The Germans had a choice: burn or surrender. 7 emerged with hands raised. They were the first prisoners Slaughter's squad had taken all day. By 1600 hours, Vierville's eastern quarter was in American hands. Slaughter's squad had killed 14 Germans and captured 7 more. They had destroyed 4 defensive positions, and their attack from an unexpected direction had created confusion throughout the German defense. Captain Bingham's main force exploited the chaos. With German attention divided between 2 threats, the defenders couldn't concentrate fire on either. American soldiers began advancing from the south, while Slaughter's squad pushed from the east. The Germans, outnumbered and outflanked, began withdrawing. At 1630 hours, German commanders ordered a general retreat from Vierville. Their defensive positions were compromised. American forces were inside the village perimeter. Staying meant encirclement and annihilation. They pulled back toward secondary positions 2 kilometers inland, leaving behind their dead and much of their equipment. But retreat didn't mean escape. Slaughter positioned his squad to cover the German withdrawal route. From approximately 200 yards, he and his men engaged Germans moving through open ground. The retreating soldiers had abandoned their fortified positions. They were exposed vulnerable, desperate to reach safety. Over 30 minutes, Slaughter personally killed 9 more Germans with rifle fire. His marksmanship was exceptional. Each shot carefully aimed, most shots finding their targets. The M1 Garand's 8-round clip emptied again and again as German soldiers fell. By 1700 hours, Vierville was secured. Slaughter's confirmed kill count for the day had reached 61, and the sun was still hours from setting. But the Germans were not finished. They understood that losing the beach positions on D-Day meant losing the war. Reinforcements were rushed toward the invasion area. Counterattacks were organized. And beginning at 1830 hours, German forces from the 352nd Infantry Division launched a series of determined assaults aimed at recapturing Vierville and pushing the Americans back into the sea. The first attack came from the south. Approximately 100 German soldiers, supported by artillery fire, advanced toward the village edge. American defenders had barely established positions. Foxholes were shallow. Fields of fire were unclear. Ammunition supplies remained limited. Slaughter's squad was positioned in buildings on the village's southern perimeter. As German artillery began falling, they took cover and waited. When the barrage lifted, German infantry was already within 50 yards. The close-range firefight was intense. Germans used grenades against American positions. Americans returned fire with everything they had. The darkness gathering made target identification difficult. Muzzle flashes became the only way to locate enemies. Slaughter positioned himself at a second-floor window with clear fields of fire. His M1 Garand barked repeatedly as German soldiers tried to advance. 3 Germans fell in the first minute. 4 more dropped as they attempted to regroup. 2 additional soldiers died trying to withdraw. The German attack broke. They had suffered 25 casualties without breaching American lines. The second attack came at 2100 hours. 200 German soldiers this time attacking from a different direction with better coordination. This assault achieved initial success. German infantry reached American positions. Close quarters fighting erupted throughout the village. Several buildings changed hands multiple times as attacks and counterattacks surged back and forth. Slaughter's building was assaulted by approximately 30 German soldiers. They threw grenades through every window, then rushed the entrances. Slaughter and his squad fought room to room on the ground floor. 4 Germans died in the hallway. 3 more on the stairs. The building held but barely. By midnight, German attacks had ceased. 4 separate assaults had been repulsed. American casualties were significant, but the positions held. German commanders recognized they couldn't dislodge the invaders. The invasion had succeeded. D-Day was over. The Germans had lost. Slaughter's final confirmed kills came during the 4th counterattack. A German squad of 8 soldiers attempting infiltration through darkness. Slaughter detected them by sound alone. He waited until they were within 30 yards. Then 4 grenades in rapid succession. All 8 Germans were killed or wounded. The final count came after midnight. Officers interviewed survivors. They examined German bodies. They reviewed reports from every engagement. Slaughter's name appeared repeatedly. On the beach, 38 confirmed kills. In Vierville, 14 confirmed kills. During the withdrawal, 9 confirmed kills. During counterattacks, 15 confirmed kills. Total, 76 confirmed German deaths directly attributable to Sergeant John Robert Slaughter. More than any other American soldier achieved on D-Day. Accomplished by the man military authorities had called too fat for combat. The company commander who had signed paperwork recommending Slaughter's transfer to non-combat duties immediately drafted a recommendation for the Distinguished Service Cross. The citation would describe extraordinary heroism and combat effectiveness. It would note that Slaughter had been instrumental in achieving D-Day objectives. And it would contain a remarkable admission that this decorated hero had been considered unfit for combat due to excessive weight by the same military that now celebrated him. But as the sun rose on June 7, 1944, Slaughter wasn't thinking about medals or recognition. He was thinking about what he had done. 76 men had died by his hand in 18 hours. Each kill had been necessary. Each German soldier eliminated had been trying to kill Americans. Combat required killing. That was the nature of war. But 76 individual human beings were dead because of his actions. Their faces would haunt him. Their deaths would follow him home. The weight of taking life, Slaughter would discover, was heavier than any pack he had ever carried. And the war was far from over. The Normandy campaign would continue for months. There would be more villages to capture, more German positions to assault, more counterattacks to repel. Slaughter would be wounded twice in the fighting ahead. He would recover both times and return to duty. He would add to his D-Day kill count as American forces pushed across France into Belgium and finally into Germany itself. By war's end, Sergeant John Robert Slaughter would have over 100 confirmed kills. One of the most effective infantry soldiers in the entire American military. And every single one achieved while being officially classified as too fat for combat. In Part 3, we'll follow Slaughter through the brutal hedgerow fighting of the Normandy campaign. We'll see how his D-Day reputation transformed him from mockery target to living legend. We'll witness German commanders placing bounties on American soldiers who demonstrated exceptional combat effectiveness. And we'll explore the psychological toll that killing 76 men in one day took on a Virginia farm boy who had only wanted to serve his country. Because medals and recognition were one thing. Living with what he had done was something else entirely. The question wasn't whether Slaughter could keep fighting. He had proven that beyond doubt. The question was whether the man who survived D-Day was the same man who had waded onto Omaha Beach that morning. And the answer, as Slaughter himself would later admit, was no. The fat sergeant they sent to die had become something else entirely. Something the military had never predicted. Something even Slaughter himself didn't fully understand. 76 confirmed kills in 18 hours. That was the final count for Sergeant John Robert Slaughter on June 6, 1944. The man the United States Army had called too fat for combat had become the deadliest American soldier on Omaha Beach. He had crawled across 200 yards of hell while others remained paralyzed. He had led the flanking assault that captured Vierville-sur-Mer. He had repelled 4 German counterattacks through the night, and when the sun rose on June 7th, the officers who had signed paperwork recommending his transfer to non-combat duties were writing recommendations for the Distinguished Service Cross instead. But D-Day was only the beginning. The Normandy campaign would stretch across months of brutal fighting. The hedgerows of France would become killing grounds that made Omaha Beach look simple. And Sergeant Slaughter, now transformed from mockery target to living legend, was about to discover that reputation brought its own dangers. Because word travels fast in war. And the Germans were about to learn exactly who had been destroying their positions. German intelligence was thorough. Even in the chaos of the invasion's aftermath, officers compiled reports on American units' tactics and individual soldiers who demonstrated exceptional effectiveness. By June 10th, 4 days after D-Day, Slaughter's name appeared in German field reports. American NCO 116th Infantry Regiment Company D, one report noted, responsible for elimination of multiple defensive positions at Vierville. Demonstrated exceptional close combat effectiveness. Recommend identification and neutralization. The Germans had learned something that American commanders had dismissed, that individual soldiers could change battlefield outcomes. Snipers, assault specialists, men who could break through defensive lines that stopped entire companies. These individuals were force multipliers, and force multipliers needed to be eliminated. By mid-June, German units facing the 29th Infantry Division had received specific intelligence about Slaughter. His physical description was circulated. His tactics were analyzed. Orders went out if the overweight American sergeant was identified, priority fire should be concentrated on his position. Slaughter had become a marked man. He didn't know it yet. But the Germans were hunting him. The Normandy hedgerow country was unlike anything American forces had trained for. The bocage, as locals called it, consisted of small fields surrounded by ancient earthen walls, topped with dense vegetation. Each hedgerow was a natural fortress. Defenders could position behind the earthen berms with excellent cover. Attackers had to cross open fields under fire, then assault through vegetation that concealed enemies until point-blank range. Casualties mounted horrifically. American units that had expected rapid advance after the beach landings found themselves grinding forward field by field, hedgerow by hedgerow. Progress was measured in hundreds of yards per day. Some units lost 90% of their strength taking a single field. The fighting was close, brutal, and relentless. Slaughter's weight, which had been irrelevant on the beach, became an unexpected advantage in hedgerow combat. His strength allowed him to crash through vegetation that slowed lighter soldiers. His bulk made him harder to knock down in close-quarters fighting. His endurance, built through years of farm labor, let him keep fighting when others collapsed from exhaustion. Between June 7th and July 25th, the 29th Infantry Division fought through the bocage toward the city of St. Lo. 7 weeks of continuous combat. Slaughter participated in over 30 separate engagements during this period. His confirmed kill count continued climbing. By July 1st, he had added 18 more German deaths to his D-Day total. By July 15th, the number reached 31 additional kills. His reputation spread through the American lines. Soldiers from other companies sought to serve alongside him. Officers requested his attachment for difficult assaults. The fat sergeant had become the most requested NCO in the regiment. But reputation came with a price. On July 3rd, during an assault on a German-held farm complex, Slaughter's squad came under concentrated sniper fire. 3 rounds struck within inches of Slaughter's position in the first minute. 2 more barely missed as he moved to cover. The fire pattern was deliberate. Someone was targeting him specifically. "Sarge, they're shooting at you," Private Wheeler observed from behind a hedgerow. "Not at us. At you." Slaughter had suspected something like this might happen. His effectiveness had made him valuable to Americans and dangerous to Germans. The concentrated fire confirmed that German intelligence had identified him. For the rest of the Normandy campaign, Slaughter would fight with a target on his back. The psychological toll was mounting. Slaughter had killed over 90 men by mid-July. Each death was necessary. Each German eliminated had been trying to kill Americans. Combat required killing. That was war's fundamental truth. But the human mind wasn't designed to process this volume of death. Slaughter began experiencing what modern psychology would call combat stress reaction. Sleep became difficult. When he did sleep, nightmares came. German faces, men he had killed, bodies falling, blood spreading, the sounds of dying. He kept fighting. He kept killing. But something inside him was changing. The Virginia farm boy who had enlisted to serve his country was becoming someone else, someone harder, someone who could kill without hesitation, someone who frightened even himself sometimes. His fellow soldiers noticed the change. Slaughter spoke less. He smiled rarely. His eyes held a flatness that hadn't been there before D-Day. The mockery about his weight had stopped entirely. No one called him Tubby or Fatty anymore. Now they called him Sergeant Slaughter, with respect bordering on fear. Some soldiers believed he was immune to death. Others thought he had made a deal with something dark. The truth was simpler and sadder. John Slaughter was burning himself out saving lives by taking them. On July 11, 1944, the crisis peaked. During an assault on German positions near the village of Martinville, Slaughter's squad was ambushed. Germans had identified their approach route and positioned a machine gun to catch them in a kill zone. The first burst killed 2 men instantly. 3 more were wounded. Slaughter and the survivors dove behind a stone wall pinned down with no immediate escape route. "We're trapped," Corporal Martinez shouted over the gunfire. "Can't go forward, can't go back. Slaughter assessed the situation. The machine gun was positioned 80 yards ahead behind a hedgerow with clear fields of fire. Standard assault tactics wouldn't work. Anyone standing to throw grenades would be cut down immediately. The wounded needed evacuation, but moving them meant exposing them to fire. For the first time since D-Day, Slaughter felt something close to despair. He had led men into a trap. His soldiers were dying because of his decision to take this route. Maybe the Germans were right to hunt him. Maybe his luck had finally run out. Maybe being too fat hadn't been wrong, just delayed in its consequences. Then Private Wheeler spoke. "Sarge, remember the beach? Remember how you just started crawling when everyone else was stuck?" The words cut through Slaughter's spiral. Wheeler was right. Omaha Beach had seemed impossible too. Every logical analysis had said movement meant death. But Slaughter had moved anyway. He had crawled across 200 yards of hell because staying still meant dying for certain. This situation was no different. "Cover me," Slaughter said. "I'm going to flank that position." "That's suicide," Martinez replied. "The whole field is exposed." "Not the drainage ditch." Slaughter pointed to a shallow depression running parallel to the German position. "It's not much cover, but it's something." Before anyone could argue further, Slaughter was moving. He rolled over the stone wall and dropped into the drainage ditch. Immediately, German fire shifted toward him. Bullets kicked up dirt inches from his body. But the slight depression provided just enough cover. He crawled. 30 yards. 50 yards. The machine gun continued firing, but the angle was wrong. The Germans couldn't depress their weapon enough to hit him in the ditch. At 60 yards, Slaughter reached a position perpendicular to the German emplacement. He was now on their flank outside their primary field of fire. He had 4 grenades. He armed the first one. Threw it. The explosion was followed by screams. The machine gun fell silent for 3 seconds as Germans reacted to the unexpected attack from their flank. Slaughter threw the second grenade. More screams. Then he was up and running, rifle blazing. 3 Germans were still alive in the position. 2 were wounded from the grenades. The third was trying to swing the machine gun towards Slaughter. All 3 died in the next 4 seconds. The ambush was broken. Slaughter had eliminated the machine gun single-handedly. His squad could now evacuate the wounded and continue the advance. But the moment crystallized something for Slaughter. He could keep fighting. He could keep killing. He could save American lives by taking German ones. That was his function now. That was his purpose. The farm boy was gone. What remained was a weapon. A highly effective, seemingly tireless weapon that the United States Army had almost discarded because of a number on a scale. July 18, 1944. The assault on St. Lo. This battle would become one of the most significant engagements of the Normandy campaign. St. Lo was a crucial road junction. Its capture would enable the Allied breakout from the hedgerow country into open terrain where American mobility and firepower advantages could be exploited. German forces understood this. They defended St. Lo with fanatical determination. The 29th Infantry Division was assigned to capture the city from the north. Intelligence estimated 3,000 German defenders in fortified positions throughout the urban area. Street fighting awaited. House-to-house combat. The kind of close-quarters battle that produced maximum casualties on both sides. Slaughter's company was designated to assault a sector on the city's northern edge. Their objective was a fortified intersection where 3 roads met. German positions included a stone church converted into a strongpoint, 2 reinforced buildings with machine gun positions, and a network of trenches connecting defensive points. Previous assaults by other units had been thrown back with heavy losses. The attack began at 0530 hours. American artillery pounded German positions for 30 minutes. Then the infantry advanced. Slaughter's squad was in the first wave. They crossed the initial 200 yards under sporadic fire. German defenders were still recovering from the artillery barrage. At 100 yards from the church, German machine guns opened up. The squad went to ground. Bullets cracked overhead. Men pressed themselves into shell craters and behind rubble. The pattern was familiar. Pin down the attackers. Pour fire into their positions. Wait for them to break or die. Slaughter didn't wait. He identified a path through the rubble that provided intermittent cover. Shell craters. Destroyed vehicles. Collapsed walls. Not continuous protection, but enough to break line of sight repeatedly. He moved. Sprint. Drop. Crawl. Sprint again. German fire followed him, but couldn't track his erratic movement. At 50 yards from the church, he found cover behind a destroyed truck. From here, he could see the church's main entrance. Sandbags blocked the doorway. A machine gun barrel protruded from a ground floor window. The position was formidable. Direct assault would be costly. Slaughter noticed something else. The church's bell tower. A sniper was positioned there firing at American soldiers in the open. But the tower had external stonework, handholds, a possible climbing route on the building's blind side. The decision formed instantly. Slaughter worked his way around the church's eastern edge. German attention was focused forward, where the rest of his company was advancing. No one was watching the building's rear. He reached the base of the tower. The stonework was old, weathered with gaps between blocks that provided grip. His 230-pound weight was a liability here. Each handhold had to bear more stress than it would for a lighter soldier. But his farm-built strength compensated. Arms that had lifted hay bales for years pulled him upward. He climbed. 30 feet. 40 feet. The sniper in the tower was focused on targets to the north. He never heard Slaughter's approach. Never saw the grenade that landed beside him. The explosion in the confined space was devastating. The sniper died instantly. Slaughter pulled himself into the tower. From here, he had a perfect view of German positions below. The church's interior was visible through holes in the floor. 8 German soldiers were positioned at windows and doorways focused outward. They didn't know death was above them. Slaughter dropped grenades through the holes. 3 explosions in rapid succession. Screams. Chaos. Then he descended through the tower's internal stairs, rifle ready. 4 Germans were still alive when he reached the ground floor. 1 was trying to crawl toward a weapon. 3 others were stunned, disoriented. All 4 died in the next 6 seconds. The church strongpoint was eliminated. Slaughter had killed 12 Germans in under 3 minutes. More importantly, the intersection's key defensive position was now in American hands. He signaled his company. Soldiers poured forward, exploiting the breakthrough. The 2 remaining German positions without the church's supporting fire became untenable. German defenders retreated into the city's interior. By noon, the northern intersection was secured. American forces had penetrated St. Lo's defenses. The battle for St. Lo continued for 2 more days. Slaughter participated in 6 additional building assaults. His personal kill count for the battle reached 23 Germans. But more significantly, his tactics were being copied throughout the division. The aggressive close-quarters assault methods he had developed were proving effective against German urban defenses. Officers who had once questioned his fitness were now studying his techniques. St. Lo fell on July 19th. The cost was 3,000 American casualties. But the strategic objective was achieved. The road junction was in Allied hands. The breakout from Normandy could begin. Operation Cobra, the massive offensive that would shatter German defenses and liberate France, launched 6 days later. The hedgerow nightmare was ending. News of Slaughter's performance at St. Lo spread beyond the 29th Division. War correspondents embedded with frontline units had heard stories about the fat sergeant who killed Germans with seemingly superhuman efficiency. Several requested interviews. Slaughter declined all of them. He had no interest in publicity. He was focused on one thing: killing Germans until the war ended or he died. But the stories spread anyway. Soldiers talk. Officers file reports. The legend of Sergeant Slaughter grew with each retelling. By August 1944, he was one of the most famous enlisted men in the European theater. The Distinguished Service Cross was formally awarded on August 3rd. The ceremony was brief. Slaughter stood at attention while a general pinned the medal to his chest. Photographers captured the moment. The citation was read aloud describing his extraordinary heroism on D-Day. No mention was made of the pre-invasion assessment that he was too fat for combat. That paperwork had quietly disappeared from his file. Slaughter's confirmed kill count by the end of the Normandy campaign stood at 94 Germans. He had been wounded twice. Shrapnel in his left arm on July 8th. A bullet grazed across his ribs on July 22nd. Both times he refused evacuation. Both times he returned to combat within days. His company commander stopped recommending medical evacuation. He knew Slaughter would refuse. The war continued into autumn. The 29th Division advanced through France into Belgium toward Germany itself. Slaughter fought in every major engagement. His kill count climbed past 100, then past 110. Each number represented a German soldier who would never see home again. Each number added weight to the burden Slaughter carried. The medal on his chest meant nothing compared to the faces in his nightmares. But there was one more chapter to this story. One that few people knew about. One that revealed what happened to the man behind the legend. Because wars end eventually. Soldiers go home. And the skills that make someone deadly in combat don't translate easily to civilian life. John Slaughter had proven that weight charts couldn't measure courage. He had demonstrated that determination mattered more than physical standards. He had killed over 100 Germans and saved countless American lives. But what happened when the killing stopped? What happened when the fat sergeant they sent to die came home? That question would haunt Slaughter for the rest of his life. And the answer, as we'll discover in Part 4, was far more complicated than any combat action he had survived. Because the hardest battle wasn't on Omaha Beach, or in the hedgerows of Normandy, or on the streets of St. Lo. The hardest battle was the one Slaughter would fight alone in silence for the next 50 years. The battle to live with what he had done. From a Virginia farm boy deemed too fat for combat to the deadliest American soldier on D-Day. From 76 confirmed kills in 18 hours to over 100 by war's end. From mockery target to Distinguished Service Cross recipient. Sergeant John Robert Slaughter's journey through World War II was a testament to everything the military height-weight charts couldn't measure. He had crawled across Omaha Beach when others remained paralyzed. He had led the assault that captured Vierville-sur-Mer. He had fought through the hedgerow hell of Normandy, survived the battle for St. Lo, and pushed into Germany itself. Officers who had signed paperwork recommending his transfer to non-combat duties ended up writing recommendations for medals instead. The system that had called him a liability celebrated him as a hero. But what happened when the guns fell silent? What happened to the man who had killed over 100 enemy soldiers and saved countless American lives? This final chapter of Slaughter's story contains a twist that few people know, because success in war often comes with a price that isn't paid until long after the last shot is fired. The war in Europe ended on May 8, 1945. Victory in Europe Day. Celebrations erupted across the Allied nations. Soldiers who had fought from Normandy to Germany finally allowed themselves to believe they had survived. Sergeant John Robert Slaughter was among them. He had been wounded twice more since St. Lo. Shrapnel in his leg during the Battle of the Bulge, a bullet through his left hand in the final push toward Berlin. Both times he had refused evacuation. Both times he had returned to combat. His final confirmed kill count stood at 113 German soldiers, one of the highest totals for any American infantryman in the European theater. When Slaughter returned to Virginia in the summer of 1945, he weighed 215 pounds. 15 pounds less than when he had enlisted. The weight loss wasn't from diet or exercise. It was from months of combat rations, constant movement, and the slow burning away of everything that wasn't essential for survival. The farm boy who had been called too fat came home thinner, but the weight he carried inside was heavier than anything he had ever lifted. The homecoming was quiet. No parades, no speeches. Slaughter took a bus from the discharge center to Roanoke, walked the last 2 miles to his family's farm, and found his mother waiting on the porch. She had aged decades in the 3 years he had been gone. His father had died in 1943 heart attack while working the fields. Slaughter had received the telegram in England 2 weeks before D-Day. There had been no time for grief then. There was barely time for it now. He resumed farming. The work was familiar, comforting in its simplicity. Plant seeds, tend crops, harvest, repeat. No one was trying to kill him. No decisions meant life or death for other men. Just dirt and sweat and the rhythm of seasons. But the nights were different. Sleep came hard if it came at all. When it did, the dreams followed. German faces, the sound of grenades detonating in confined spaces, the wet thud of bullets hitting flesh, the screams that stopped suddenly when men died. Slaughter would wake sweating, heart-pounding, reaching for a rifle that wasn't there. Modern psychology would call it post-traumatic stress disorder. In 1945, they called it combat fatigue, or soldier's heart, or nothing at all. Men were expected to come home and resume normal lives. The war was over. Move on. Don't talk about it. Slaughter didn't talk about it. Not to his mother. Not to the neighbors who knew he had served but didn't know the details. Not to the young women his mother occasionally invited to dinner, hoping her son might settle down and start a family. He couldn't explain what he had done. He couldn't explain why 113 dead men haunted him, even though each killing had been necessary. He couldn't explain how a man could be celebrated as a hero and feel like a monster at the same time. The Distinguished Service Cross sat in a drawer. Slaughter never displayed it. When visitors asked about his service, he would acknowledge he had been at D-Day, then change the subject. The legendary Fat Sergeant, who had killed 76 Germans in one day, wanted to forget that man had ever existed. But the legacy of what Slaughter had accomplished extended far beyond his personal torment, and the lessons of his story would influence military thinking for generations to come. The U.S. Army conducted extensive after-action analysis of the D-Day landings. Officers studied what had worked and what had failed. They examined individual performances to understand why some soldiers were effective in combat, while others froze or fled. Slaughter's case attracted particular attention. Here was a soldier who had been formally classified as unfit for frontline combat due to his weight. Yet he had outperformed every other American soldier on the deadliest beach of the invasion. The contradiction demanded explanation. Military researchers interviewed Slaughter's surviving squad mates. They reviewed his training records. They analyzed his combat actions in detail. The conclusions challenged fundamental assumptions about physical fitness standards. Slaughter's effectiveness, the researchers determined, came from factors that existing fitness tests didn't measure. His strength, built through years of farm labor, exceeded what lighter soldiers possessed, despite their better performance on timed runs. His endurance, developed through sustained physical work, rather than short-duration exercises, proved more relevant to combat's demands than sprint times. His mental resilience, shaped by hardship and determination, allowed him to function when others broke down. The Army didn't immediately change its height-weight standards. Bureaucracies moved slowly, and the post-war drawdown reduced urgency for personnel reforms. But Slaughter's case was documented, studied, and referenced in subsequent discussions about fitness requirements. By the Korean War, military researchers were developing more sophisticated approaches to measuring combat potential. Physical fitness tests began incorporating sustained endurance events alongside speed-based exercises. The concept of functional fitness, the ability to perform job-specific tasks regardless of weight gain traction. Slaughter wasn't the only factor in these changes, but his story contributed to a growing recognition that body weight alone was a poor predictor of combat effectiveness. The Vietnam War brought further evolution. Special Forces selection programs explicitly rejected rigid height-weight standards in favor of holistic capability assessments. Soldiers who would have been rejected under World War II standards served with distinction in some of the war's most demanding units. The recognition that determination, skill, and mental toughness mattered more than fitting a chart had become institutional doctrine. Today, military fitness standards continue evolving toward capability-based assessment. The U.S. Army's current fitness test, implemented in 2020, emphasizes functional movements over simple metrics. Soldiers are evaluated on their ability to perform combat-relevant tasks, not on whether their weight falls within arbitrary ranges. The journey from Slaughter's rejection to modern assessment methods took 8 decades. But the principle he demonstrated on Omaha Beach, that charts measure charts, not capability, has become accepted wisdom. His 113 confirmed kills proved what no height-weight table could predict: that the man everyone dismissed might prove most capable of all. But the legacy of Slaughter's story extends beyond military fitness standards. His experience illustrates broader truths about how institutions evaluate potential and how often they get it wrong. Every organization has height-weight charts of some kind. Metrics and standards that seem objective but often miss what actually matters. Companies reject candidates whose resumes don't fit templates. Schools evaluate students on test scores that measure test-taking ability more than intelligence. Sports teams pass on athletes who don't match physical prototypes. The assumption is always the same: that what we can easily measure predicts what we actually care about. Slaughter's story challenges this assumption profoundly. The metrics said he was deficient. Reality said the metrics were measuring the wrong things. His strength came from work, not from low body weight. His endurance came from character, not from fast sprint times. His combat effectiveness came from determination, skill, and courage, none of which appeared on any form the Army used to evaluate him. The pattern repeats throughout history. Edwin Land was told his instant photography idea was impractical before founding Polaroid. Steve Jobs was fired from the company he created before returning to make it the world's most valuable. Abraham Lincoln lost 8 elections before winning the presidency. The people who change the world are often the people that existing systems reject. This doesn't mean all rejected ideas are secretly brilliant. Most aren't. But it does mean that rejection by conventional standards isn't evidence of deficiency. Sometimes it's evidence that conventional standards are inadequate. Slaughter was rejected because he was overweight. He succeeded because weight had nothing to do with what mattered. The lesson isn't that physical fitness standards are unnecessary. They serve legitimate purposes. The lesson is that standards are tools, not truths. They approximate reality without capturing it fully. And when reality contradicts standards, it's the standards that should be questioned, not reality. Military leaders who study Slaughter's case today draw this conclusion: evaluate people on what they can do, not on what metrics predict they should be able to do. Give the too fat sergeant a chance to prove himself. You might be surprised. You might find that the person everyone doubted becomes the most effective warrior on the battlefield. There's one more chapter to this story, one that most accounts of Slaughter's life miss entirely. It concerns what happened in 1985, 41 years after D-Day, when a letter arrived at Slaughter's farm from someone he had never expected to hear from. The letter was written in German. It came from Munich. The writer identified himself as Klaus Richter, formerly a sergeant in the German 352nd Infantry Division. He had defended Omaha Beach on June 6, 1944. He had survived the American assault, been captured 3 days later, and spent 2 years in a prisoner of war camp before returning to Germany. For 40 years, Richter had carried questions about that day. He had seen the carnage inflicted on American forces. He had watched soldiers die in the surf and on the sand. But he had also witnessed something that haunted him: a single American soldier, larger than the others, crawling across the beach with impossible determination, eliminating German positions one by one. Richter had survived because his bunker was on the eastern edge of the American assault zone. The big American had been working west to east. By the time he reached Richter's position, other Americans were following. Richter surrendered rather than fight. The big American had looked at him for a long moment, then moved on. he had spared Richter's life. For 40 years, Richter wondered who that soldier was. He researched American units that had landed at Omaha Beach. He read after-action reports that had been declassified. He found references to a sergeant named Slaughter who had killed an extraordinary number of Germans. He traced Slaughter's service record, found his hometown, and wrote the letter that arrived in Virginia in 1985. The letter was simple. Richter wanted Slaughter to know that the man he had spared had lived a full life. He had married. He had children and grandchildren. He had become a teacher. He had tried to build a better world than the one that had sent young men to kill each other on a beach in France. He wanted to thank the American who had shown mercy when mercy was not required. Slaughter received the letter. He read it once, then again. Then he went outside and cried for the first time since the war. Not tears of sadness. Not tears of joy. Something more complicated. The recognition that even in the worst moments of human violence, humanity could survive. That the same man who had killed 76 Germans had also spared one who went on to teach children. That war was not just killing. It was choices. Every trigger pull was a choice. Every grenade was a choice. And sometimes the choice not to kill mattered as much as all the choices to kill. Slaughter wrote back. The two men exchanged letters for 6 years. In 1991, they met in person at a D-Day memorial ceremony in Normandy. The photographs from that meeting show two old men embracing on the beach where they had tried to kill each other 47 years before. Former enemies, former soldiers. Now just men who had survived something terrible and found peace with each other. Slaughter died on March 11, 1998, at age 88. His obituary in the local Virginia paper was brief. It mentioned his farm, his service in World War II, his Distinguished Service Cross. It didn't mention the 113 confirmed kills or the legend of the Fat Sergeant. Those details mattered to military historians. To Slaughter, they had become less important than the letter from Munich and what it represented. They called him too fat for the front lines. They said he would be a liability. They recommended he push papers instead of carrying a rifle. They looked at a number on a chart and decided they knew everything about his capability. They were completely and utterly wrong. John Robert Slaughter killed 76 Germans on D-Day, more than any other American soldier. He killed 113 by war's end. He earned the Distinguished Service Cross. He changed how military evaluators think about physical fitness. He proved that charts measure charts, not courage. That weight indicates nothing about determination. That the person everyone doubts might be the most capable of all. And decades later, on a beach in Normandy, he embraced a German he had spared, proving that even warriors can choose mercy. That even in war's darkest moments, humanity survives. That was the true measure of John Slaughter. Not the kills, not the medals, the choices. If you know another story of someone who was dismissed, doubted, told they couldn't succeed, and proved everyone wrong, share it in the comments below. These stories matter. They remind us that conventional judgment is often wrong, that potential exists in unexpected places, that the too fat sergeant might become the hero nobody predicted. Subscribe for more untold stories from military history, the chapters they don't teach in school, the soldiers they almost rejected, the ideas they called impossible. Because somewhere right now, someone is being told they're not good enough, that they don't fit the standards, that they should accept a lesser role. And maybe like John Slaughter, they'll prove everyone wrong. They called him too fat for the front lines. He became the deadliest American soldier on D-Day. That's what happens when you measure the wrong things.